After the break, we'll have all your news for the West Country,
including 2 football funnies involving Plymouth and Yeovil. That's all coming up in a couple of minutes.
Now, the latest from ITV News in the West Country with Jonty and Kylie Pentelow.
Hello and welcome to Wednesday's programme.
Coming up tonight between now and 6:30. Derriford Hospital in Cornwall says it's struggling to cope with demand after making extra ward space for COVID patients.
Also on the programme, the former surf champion from Newquay who's avoided jail despite possessing indecent images of children.
There's a child behind every one of those images, and every one of those children has experienced sexual abuse.
Cornwall Council says jobs and services could be at risk with £70 million of cuts planned from its budget.
Also have reaction from last night's football, including how this bizarre goal helped Plymouth Argyle stay top of League One.
Now meet the 16-year-old environmental campaigner cycling to Glasgow to question world leaders on climate change.
Good evening. Derriford Hospital says it is having to make extra ward space for COVID patients as cases continue to rise across the West Country. Health bosses have also warned they're under increasing pressure with high numbers attending the region's emergency departments.
And our ambulance service is recording the longest response times for life-threatening and emergency incidents in the whole of the country. Well, for more on this, Bob Crees is at Derriford Hospital for us tonight. Bob, this isn't a good picture for the health service as we start to head towards winter.
No, in Plymouth alone, there have been more than 1,100 new coronavirus cases in the past 7 days. And here at Derriford Hospital, they're seeing 5 new COVID-positive patients being admitted to hospital every single day. So they're having to make more room for them. They've now got 54 beds set aside for patients with coronavirus. And this morning they put out a message on social media trying to explain how serious the situation is getting. The wait in the emergency department this evening is up over 6 hours now, but it has been much higher than that over the past few days.
Emergency department has been under pretty much sustained pressure for a long period of time. In the last 24 hours we had over 320 patients attend, and over 100 of those were brought by ambulance. As a consequence of that, some patients have experienced really long delays, and we're very sorry for that. Ambulance handovers have been an issue for us as well, and there have been times when patients have had to wait to be handed over to the care of our emergency department.
Well, Derriford certainly isn't alone in this situation. Have a look at this post on Twitter from an ambulance crew in Cornwall yesterday. In a queue of 25 ambulances waiting outside the Royal Cornwall Hospital to hand over their patients. This is having significant knock-on effects for the ambulance service right across the southwest.
Real thing that has changed and is having a crippling impact on our ability to perform as a service is our ability to get our patients into hospital as quickly as possible. 2 years ago, on an average week, we would lose about 400 hours in handover delays. Yesterday, one single day, we lost just over 900 hours. I think that says it all.
Well, here at Derriford, they're appealing for the public to do whatever they can to try to help ease the pressure on the system. The advice at the moment is to ring 111 before you turn up at the hospital emergency department, just to check that this is the right place to be coming for help. They're also asking people to collect relatives as soon as possible who have been discharged from hospital to make space for more people who are arriving. And the third thing they say is to get your COVID vaccination if you haven't already.
Bob Crees in Plymouth, thank you very much.
Well, the rise in COVID cases and its impact on our health service is also being discussed in Westminster. Our political correspondent David Wood is there for us this evening. And David, just how worried is the government about the current COVID situation?
Jonty, I think the government is worried in the sense it's now looking over the data daily as it gets it in terms of new infections and hospitalisations. But at the moment, it's not panicking, at least in terms of the country's response. Let's just take a look in the West Country. Almost 6,000 new positive cases of COVID reported in the region today. I can count on one hand how many times that number has been above 6,000 during this pandemic. So just one statistic there to show you how cases have started to increase again, and they are continuing to go in the wrong direction. A little more than 500 people are in the region's hospitals with COVID, but there is still this confidence amongst scientists and the government that, yes, those numbers are growing, but still vaccines are having a huge impact in ensuring that people aren't getting severely ill with this virus.
And with that in mind, David, there are calls for a so-called Plan B to be brought in to try to manage the virus. Is this likely at all?
I don't think at the moment it is, Jonty, but it's certainly something the government has in its back pocket. But health chiefs are calling for Plan B to be implemented almost immediately. It would see classroom bubbles returning, face masks becoming compulsory on public transport again and in shops and other confined spaces, and perhaps those vaccine passports coming in. This is where you've got to prove your vaccine status before you could get into certain events and certain venues. The government, though, at the moment says there is no need for Plan B. A lot of the increase in cases seem to be amongst school-aged children. There's hope with the half-term holiday coming up that youngsters won't be seeing each other as much, and that could stop them passing the virus on to each other. But the big push tonight from the government is that anyone who qualifies for a booster jab, 450,000 people in the West Country have already had theirs. Well, if you haven't had it yet and you qualify, you should step forward, and that will help control this virus.
David Wood at Westminster, thank you. Next on the programme this evening, a former surf champion from Newquay has avoided jail despite pleading guilty to possessing hundreds of indecent images of children.
50-year-old Lee Bartlett was given an 8-month suspended prison sentence. Well, for more on this, Marina Jenkins is in Newquay. Tell us more, Marina.
Yes, well, surfing communities in Newquay and around the UK might be familiar with the name Lee Bartlett. He's a well-known surfer and a 4 times British Open champion. But the 50-year-old has come under severe scrutiny for his behaviour between 2018 and June 2020. Earlier, he appeared in Truro Crown Court, where he pled guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. In total, he was found to be in possession of 600 images. 187 of those were of an indecent nature and Category A. He was now sentenced to 8 years in 8 months in prison, but he's now been given a suspended sentence of 2 years. Earlier, we spoke to the NSPCC, who said behaviour like Bartlett's cannot be tolerated.
Well, I think when we're hearing about the number of images, over 600 images, we need to be really careful not to forget that there's a child behind every one of those images, and every one of those children has experienced sexual abuse and is effectively re-abused every time one of their images is accessed. So whilst we can be focused on the number of images, we just need to remember there's a child behind every single one of those. And the abuse that they experience can affect them for the rest of their lives.
Bartlett must now complete 40 hours of a rehabilitation programme and must also do 100 hours of unpaid work. He will be on the sex offenders register for 10 years and has also been issued a sexual offences prevention order. That often includes things like not being allowed to visit public places where there may be children, like a playground, not being allowed to have a computer that isn't monitored, and also not being allowed to delete internet history. But today, the NSPCC said actions like Bartlett's and many others are very dangerous, and they are fueling this horrific industry.
Marina Jenkins, thank you. On to other news, and police are trying to identify a man whose body was found off the Devon coast. The body of the man in the wetsuit was recovered by a boat 46 miles off Salcombe last month. Officers say the death is unexplained. The person could be from another country. He's not one of the divers who went missing while exploring HMS Scylla.
4th Street in St Ives was closed this morning after a large fire broke out in a restaurant for the second time in little more than a year. 6 crews from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service responded to the call at the Balcony restaurant at around 6 a.m. The service says nobody was injured.
The RNLI is warning people to only visit beaches with lifeguards in Devon and Cornwall this half-term. Footage has been released of a recent rescue where a surfer was swept towards the rocks. The charity plans to increase its cover during the break on beaches in the southwest, with thousands of tourists expected to visit our region.
Now, staff at Cornwall Council could be facing redundancy as bosses plan to cut £70 million from the county's budget.
An internal email seen by ITV News shows the authority is facing a large overspend as a result of the pandemic, which could mean cuts to services, jobs and even the number of buildings owned by the council. Sam Blackledge reports.
It's a problem facing councils up and down the country, and Cornwall is no exception. Quite simply, there is more money going out than there is coming in, and that could mean that workers end up paying the price. Cornwall Council is facing a major overspend, and in order to remain financially stable, some eye-watering savings must be made. £70 million needs to be found next year, around 10% of the council's entire revenue budget. In an email seen by ITV News, council bosses said, "We've looked at all of our expenditure and know there are some difficult decisions to make, both in terms of the number of people who work for the council and the number and size of contracts we have with suppliers." Staff costs make up a big chunk of the budget. By March 2022, £18 million must be shaved off the organisation's £200 million wage bill. How many jobs will be lost is not yet clear. The Conservative-run council says compulsory redundancies will be unavoidable, but measures will be taken to minimise them. Opposition members are unimpressed.
In any organisation, the staff are your greatest asset. So all through the pandemic, in the last 18 months, those key workers within Cornwall Council have been working hard to keep us safe and keep those vital services running. So a year ago, the Conservatives were clapping for key workers, and now this announcement really is a kick in the teeth.
The council says that by bringing in recruitment freezes and using voluntary redundancy, it can avoid forcibly laying off too many staff. But unions are getting nervous.
Our primary concern at the moment is obviously trying to mitigate compulsory redundancies, and we'll be working closely with the council to do everything we can and to make strong representations to prevent job losses. But the wider impact of that is that there are going to be fewer people left working for the council in the new year to provide really vital public services. The services that people don't necessarily think about on a day-to-day basis that are happening, but would notice them when they stop.
The council is already embroiled in a growing crisis over the future of its leisure centres. 4 centres in Falmouth, Launceston, Saltash and Weybridge could shut their doors, a suggestion which has sparked angry protests. We did ask someone from Cornwall Council to talk to us about the wider financial pressures, but nobody was available. Sam Blackledge, ITV News, Truro.
And you're watching ITV News here in the West Country. Thanks for your company. There is still plenty more on our programme before 6:30, including we'll be taking a look at how our teams got on in last night's football fixtures.
And it's all going on with the weather, wet and windy conditions through this evening, much colder and brighter tomorrow. I'll be back later with all the details.
And the ITV News continues with the national and international stories at 6:30. Mary Nightingale has the details.
Coming up in the programme, we will have all the latest from the Health Secretary's press conference as concerns over COVID rise again. It follows warnings from the NHS for serious winter crisis if stricter restrictions are not imposed. Also heard the Queen cancels a trip to Northern Ireland after doctors tell her to rest. And why the Justice Secretary was being driven around by a serving prisoner in an HGV. Do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Next on our programme, to the once-in-a-lifetime boom in used car prices. A shortage of new cars along with a spike in demand means that the cost of used cars is up over 20% year on year.
One dealership in the West Country says the market's still feeling the knock-on impact of the coronavirus shutdown. Catherine Walker has been to find out more.
For many of us, buying a car is a big decision with a big price tag. This used car dealership in Plymouth say they've seen a surge in the number of customers looking to get behind the wheel.
We have seen a huge demand in the second-hand car market. It's been a lot busier than it normally is, and as a result of that we found ourselves selling an awful lot out of area where normally we'd be a bit more localised, but because of the demand that the used car market is faced, we are selling to places that we've never sold to before.
So what does that mean for the industry? Well, an increase in demand coupled with a shortage of supply for brand new vehicles means the cost of buying a second-hand car like this is rising.
In fact, new figures show the cost of buying a used car has increased by 21.4% year on year. In September 2020, a used car cost an average of £13,800. By September 2021, that had risen to over £16,000.
So used car prices have been consistently increasing now for over 2 years. Every month it feels like we break a new record in terms of that year-on-year increase. And at the moment there's nothing we're seeing in the market data that suggests that pricing growth is going to reset. So it really is an unprecedented market.
That uncertainty is hitting customers in the pocket. After having a baby, Ruth needed to upgrade to a bigger family car. But her new set of wheels came with a bigger price tag than she was expecting.
We were sort of looking to spend quite a sort of small budget of £2,500 on a car. We're sort of hoping to kind of get something maybe 2011, 2012, so it's still fairly old. But just with the price increases, we realised actually we need to increase that. So we paid just over £3,000 for a car that's a 2010, so actually slightly older.
Experts say if you can afford to be patient, buying a used car could be cheaper in the future.
Usually we tend to see a steep decline in the value of a car as soon as you drive off the forecourt, but that seems not to be the case anymore. What we're seeing is it's now become a seller's market. So the car that you have today, which you bought last year, may be worth actually more than what you paid for it. So you could probably sell that back to your dealer and make a profit.
With new car production still recovering from the coronavirus shutdown, there's a long road ahead until the used car market returns to normal. For now, it's bumper profits for those looking to sell. Catherine Walker, ITV News.
OK, it's time for a bit of a sport now. And in football, Plymouth Argyle made it 3 wins in a row last night as they saw off Bolton at a rain-soaked home park.
Yeah, it was also a good night for Exeter City as well. The Grecians moved into the League Two playoff places. And the West Country derby between Weymouth and Yeovil provided plenty of FA Cup magic. Here's Tim Walsh.
Plymouth Argyle manager Ryan Lowe praised his ground staff after the home park pitch took a battering in monsoon conditions. Brendan Galloway's cheeky back heel gave the Pilgrims an early lead against Bolton. Connor Grant soon doubled the advantage when his long-range strike skimmed off the wet surface. The conditions at home park deteriorated rapidly, which led to Argyle's third deep into injury time. With the ball getting held up on the waterlogged pitch, Danny Mayer raced clear and looked certain to score. But the ball got stuck in a puddle. Ryan Hardy was then tackled, but luckily Ryan Broom was on hand to slam the ball home. Cue the Klinsmann dive and swimming celebrations. A third win in a row keeps Lowe's men top of the table, but Sunderland are just a point behind with 2 games in hand. The Pilgrims make the long journey to Morecambe on Saturday. In League Two, Exeter City ended their run of draws with a win at Crawley. The Grecians fell behind in the first half when keeper Cameron Dawson was caught out of position. Matt Taylor's men were helped by the hosts having a player sent off just before half-time. Matt Jay equalised 10 minutes into the second half before Nigel Atangana turned the game around. And the win was sealed in the final minute when Sam Nombe scored his 6th goal in as many games. Yeovil Town are through to the first round of the FA Cup after beating bitter rivals Weymouth on penalties in their replay. Matt Worthington put the Glovers ahead, but Josh McCoy's header took the game to extra time. No goals in extra time, so the match would have to be decided on penalties. Weymouth missed 3 of their spot kicks, while Yeovil missed 2. Dale Gorman scoring the decisive penalty to set up a tie with either Dover or Yatetown. Tim Walsh, ITV News.
Oh, I reckon they could have done with you last night to take one of these penalties.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been any good in that rain though. God, that looked
quite
wet.
fun, really, more like a swimming pool than a football pitch. OK, now the countdown is on to what many view as the last chance for governments to come together to try to prevent the worst effects of global warming.
The world's politicians and scientists will be gathering for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP26, at the start of next month.
Well, over the last few weeks, ITV weather presenter Alex Beresford has been looking at some simple changes we can make to help save our planet. And tonight, he finds out we can all recycle more than we think.
Now, how many of us have bought a bottle of water on our lunch break or bought milk in the supermarket? Believe it or not, plastic production is expected to more than double over the next 20 years. So how we recycle it is going to become more vital than ever. So I've come here to find out how important it is that we're doing it right. And this is where it starts. Thousands upon thousands of used plastics making their way along the conveyor belt. Once sorted, they're crushed, ready for the next part of their life. In 2020, nearly 2.5 million tonnes of plastic packaging waste was collected across the UK, with just under half of that recycled. Latest available monthly figures show that in August, Plymouth City Council picked up nearly 200 tonnes of plastic from households. Over the last year, collections add up to more than 2,000 tonnes. And of course, our rubbish isn't just made up of plastic. There are mountains of other household items like glass, cardboard and paper. And what I didn't know is how we recycle those items really matters.
If your recycling is contaminated, which is when you might have food in there or flimsy plastic in with the rest of your plastic that can be recycled, then when it's baled up, that bale might contain too many of the wrong things and the whole bale might be rejected.
Tell me the best way to recycle cardboard, because I understand that if it gets wet, it can be a bit more tricky.
Cardboard should be flattened or folded up with all of the tape or any plastic labels taken off of it. And you should keep it as dry as possible. It's much harder to process it for recycling if it's damp when you put it in the box or if it gets left out in the rain.
Now here's something I've only just found out about, and that's some of our major supermarkets are now accepting soft plastic recycling. So that's anything from crisp packets to bread bags and also the lids from ready meals. So here's my contribution. Paula Chin spent more than 20 years working in the packaging industry. She now campaigns for resources to be used more efficiently.
Plastic is everywhere. It's been found in the highest mountains and the deepest parts of the ocean. It's in the air we breathe. It's been found in water that we drink. It is one of the most visible symptoms of the environmental crisis that we're facing right now. So whether it be plastics, whether it be paper, aluminium, in the broader picture, we have to think about our overall resource consumption and make sure we're tackling our throwaway culture.
So I've learnt quite a lot today. I can recycle my dog's food pouches, my son's crisp packets, and I need to double check the weather forecast before I put out my cardboard waste. All small things that can add up to a big change.
Yeah, that's Alex there. It can be a bit confusing, can't it, when you've got your recycling and all your different boxes and what to put in what.
Time consuming as well, but it does make a difference.
Yeah, and sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming, but we've all got to do our bit, haven't we? Well, you can, if you want to find out more about those small changes that you can make to your lifestyle, we've got plenty more advice on our website. And in Alex's final piece next week, he'll be looking at the impact that our diet is having on the planet too.
Well, meanwhile, a 16-year-old girl from Newton Abbot is hoping that she can have an impact at COP26.
Yeah, Jessie Stevens has set off from her home for a 575-mile journey by bike all the way to Glasgow. She's called her mission People Pedal Power and hopes to attract as many followers along the way as she can. And she certainly got off to a good start, as Richard Lawrence reports.
Buoyed up by a group of followers, 16-year-old Jessie Stevens set off undaunted by her mission.
I think it's really exciting but very nerve-wracking because I've never done anything like this before.
They happen to have gathered at the historic site where the Declaration was first read out for William of Orange, who then marched to London to become King William III. Jessie explained why she was embarking on her own crusade for change.
I want to raise awareness for the lack of sustainable transport infrastructure in the UK, and also the need for better people-led decision-making and collective action in regards to the climate crisis.
What sort of things are you going to find along the way?
Lots of hills, but hopefully not too many. I think we're going to hopefully find lots of joy in riding together and meeting new people and learning from each other and bringing lots of diverse voices to the climate crisis and topics around it.
Jonty recently became hooked on cycling, and members of the local cycle club that inspired her say she's the one inspiring others.
I think it's phenomenal that she's trying to do, a girl of her age. I'm not sure I'd have been as brave as she is to take on this trip.
I think she's absolutely amazing. I've known the family for years, and she's just so driven, so well spoken about everything she talks about, and just completely passionate. And so, we're here to support her for the morning, and we'll follow her journey with interest.
Climate change campaigners she's marched alongside with before had also turned out.
COP26 is such an important event for the world, I would suggest, and Jess is making a fantastic statement, cycling all that way, highlighting the plight of young people, and she's been an absolute inspiration to us all the last couple of years.
Her father is cycling with her to Lancaster, and her support equipment is also on a bike. Her mother will join the second half and was proud to see her off.
I'm very, very proud. Quite nervous for her, a bit anxious, but I think once she gets going, she'll get into the rhythm and the spirit of it and she'll be fine. I think it's just quite overwhelming, isn't it? But at the same time, just incredible.
The first 15 miles went well before the first quick coffee break.
It's been really great fun, actually. It's been so lovely to see so many people out and have the great atmosphere of collective action and moving together. So, yeah.
The People Pedal Power mission was back on its way, with Jessie leading, hoping many others will follow. Richard Lawrence, ITV News.
Yeah, good luck from all of us, Jessie. It may have been raining a fair bit at the end of Richard's report there. Elsewhere, though, it's not been too bad of a day for getting out on your bike. And this was the view at Perranporth, looking glorious in some bright blue skies and sunshine earlier. Plenty of people making the most of it as well, out enjoying that lovely expanse of sand. What's it looking like for the next few days? Let's get you the forecast now. Here's Philippa Drew.
Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV West Country weather.
Hello there. Well, it's been a fairly changeable picture over the last few days, and it remains that way through the next 12 or 24 hours or so. So much so that Met Office have a yellow warning in force for some heavy rain and some particularly strong and gusty winds coming our way throughout this evening and during the first part of the night. And it's all courtesy of this deep little area of low pressure that will be tracking its way eastwards through the next few hours, bringing a good few hours of hefty rain accompanied by strong winds. As it starts to clear away, we then start to see signs of quite a big change. We'll see a front sinking its way southwards through the course of tomorrow morning, and as it clears through, whilst things will settle down, you'll see winds will have changed to a northwesterly, and that's going to introduce something much colder than we've seen of late. But back to this evening, that hefty rain already with us. It will gradually clear away eastwards. Behind it, clear spells and showers to follow. Still some fairly blustery winds, but a mild night still for the time of year. Lows of 8 or 9 Celsius for many. Tomorrow morning then, we'll see thickening cloud and patchy rain sinking its way southwards. Nothing much in the way of rain compared to the stuff we're seeing at the moment. And then once it clears, some lovely sunshine coming through for the rest of the day. But as I said, a big dip in those temperatures tomorrow. Really through much of October, we've been comfortably above average. Tomorrow will be a little below, highs just 12 or 13 degrees at best. These are the high tides for tomorrow. Then for Portland, they're 2 minutes past 8 in the morning, 8:14 in the evening. And then looking ahead, well, for Friday, really more of the same. So another fairly dry, bright, if rather chilly day, thickening cloud through the course of the weekend. The eventual arrival of some further rain on Sunday. Do take care. Bye-bye.
Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV West Country weather.
Thanks, Philippa. Just before we go, a reminder that there is plenty more coverage online for you this evening, including the story of the rodents that left an area of North Devon without internet access. Close to 2,000 people were affected by the outage, which was caused by the creatures chewing through the cables.
Yeah, and a lot of you have commented on this one. Catherine Lucas says, my pet rats have done this several times over the years.
Yeah, nice one keeping pet rats. Paul Newton's also been in touch with a very clever joke. You don't need a cable if you have a wireless mouse.
Ba-bum. You can see more of the day's stories on our website. There are the details for you on the screen. But that's it from us. The late news is at the usual time of 10:30.
Now, they will hand you to Mary Nightingale as the ITV National News continues. From all of us, have a lovely evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.